Hashtag Trending would like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and cellular in one integrated solution that's built for performance and scale. You can find them at meter.com/HTT. Welcome to Project Synapse, our weekly show on AI and all things tech, because we can't stay focused. That doesn't mean, we can't stay focused. I'm just joking. But the show is really about AI, but how it impacts our lives and how it impacts our world. And that leads us to all kinds of other things. And if you're wondering why I'm backpedaling like mad on my introduction, it's because we're going to actually expand our topic a little bit. We've got a new guest this week, and I think we'll stay focused on what we're doing, but I think we'll add some new insight to which directions we're going on. Our regular panelists, Marcel, Gagne, John Pinard. Good morning, John.
Hello, folks.
And our new guest is Kevin Russell. And Kevin does a lot of things. I'm going to let Kevin introduce himself because I looked at it and went, where would I start? He's joined us for this morning. Kevin, welcome.
So I'm Kevin Russell. I'm Director of Simulation Innovation Strategy at the Human Space Program, and we're a nonprofit based out of Massachusetts. And our work is focused around Frank White's seminal work in the overview effect and the books he's written about that, which the overview effect is a perceptual shift that happens when people see the planet from above. And I've been there. We've been working on this for about 5 years. The books have been out since the 80s. And before I was in interactive computing, I did a number of stints in medical simulation, and sound engineering was my first career. And that's it in a nutshell.
So when I met Kevin, this whole idea, and we'll talk about this in a minute after we get through the regular AI news that has happened this week, but I wanted to talk about this idea of perception and how we see the world. We had a fascinating chat about that and other things. We'll pick up on that. Join us, Kevin. We started this as a discussion between the three of us who were grappling with AI and the rapid changes in technology that were happening to us. And we were working with it every day, and we get together every week to talk about some of the issues that we'd found working with it hands-on. And that's a story of Project Synapse and how it came about. The one I'm going to just jump in, though, with the big news this week. And Marcel, I saw a note from you in our Discord. Sorry, there's so many places I'm looking now for things. I just look at it and go, you were in our Discord. And I recommend people join that. There's a lot of good stuff that's posted in there. Mostly Marcel does yeoman's work of getting a lot of things in there, and so do others. But I wanted to talk about the Bot, also known as Clawdbot, that happened this week. And I did a whole show on it. I rarely, for hashtag trending, and even for cybersecurity today, with different emphasis, one being security, of course, one being its impact itself. This just snuck up on us. This Bot arrived in December, I think. In 2 months, it had generated 108,000 stars on GitHub, which is absolutely historic. I think there's only one other app that's done that. And just to put it in perspective, the stars put there by people who are interested in the project, a follower thing on GitHub, I didn't even know it existed till I saw this 108,000 stars. I dug around a little bit and looked at Linux, which has a little over 200,000 stars after 30 years. If that's the number of followers you get in this, and even if you compared it to the first week of OpenAI, that's just developers adding things. And they did they did 8,000 commits in 2 months. That's astonishing. So
yeah,
it's been popular. Jump in, Marcel.
First of all, I was surprised that it was suddenly this amazingly popular thing. And I went out and I actually bought a VPS. I rented a VPS, as one does for these things, because it sure as hell wasn't going to load this on my personal PC right off the bat. And I set it up using an OVH server, so a VPS on OVH. And the first thing that hit me on the whole thing was, even before we get to the whole security issues, was honestly, I was trying to figure out what the whole excitement was about it. And I don't mean to knock the idea of this agent that responds to you personally and deals with you personally is something that we've always wanted. It's certainly something that I've wanted since I was watching Star Trek, the original series back in the day. I wanted the computer to respond to me, to know me, to do things for me, that sort of thing. So that's kind of like the dream, okay? So of course, this thing blows up all of a sudden, which by the way that it has blown up and the number of stars that showed up as you put it on GitHub should be a red flag to just about anybody right off the bat, okay? There's no way in hell that this thing jumps up the way that it did without some serious pushing, perhaps even automated pushing. And keep in mind that this is an automated agent, but I digress. So I loaded up this thing, and then my first thought was, so the big deal is that I can communicate with my AI through WhatsApp or Telegram or something like that. And I set up WhatsApp. Telegram turns out is actually easier, just from personal experience already. And then I thought, there's nothing here that I can do that's particularly interesting that I can't do with ChatGPT, that I can't do with Gemini, that I can't do with Claude as it exists today. It just sits in the background and it comes up with ideas on its own. I can do scheduled tasks in all of the frontier models, including Grok, by the way. I already have my morning briefing of news for the day and stuff like that coming through the various AI systems, or sorry, the various frontier models. And then there's the whole rigmarole that you have to do to actually get this thing set up. First of all, it is complex enough to set up a secure shell tunnel for people who don't know what that is, just to be clear. So what they do is they just open up the port to the internet, and it's a default port, and everybody can scan a damn thing, and it's clear text going across the internet. And then they've got their AI API keys in the background. So people connect to these open ports. John, I'm surprised that you weren't sitting there going on the other side of the world.
He was. I had to talk him down last night.
I freaked out when
I
I
just
saw
kept
the
thinking-
video of it.
I just kept thinking, man, John is just going crazy over there. And then, so you've got the open ports for this thing, and people put in their API keys. And Jim, you even pointed out one of the, and I'll save him the embarrassment by not naming him, but one of the big AI YouTubers out there went and looked at his dashboard on camera, and I think you did this on your show as well, Jim. Looked at his and said, "Oh my God, I spent $200 overnight because the damn thing is burning through tokens like crazy." So you open it up to the internet, you give your API key to the world, and what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Anyway, I have uninstalled what was Clawdbot, then became Moltbot. I have uninstalled it. It doesn't do anything that I couldn't possibly do with my models. And by the way, I can talk to ChatGPT remotely without going through frickin' Telegram.
That was the first thing that came across when it said, I can't talk to it. I went, Marcel's already written that. So if this thing's so smart, why can't it write? Now, but it did, and this is either a failure of the YouTube world, and I must confess, I've followed some of these guys. They're pretty sharp. Everybody and their dog on YouTube was coming out going, this is amazing, this is astonishing. And it is in terms of the connectivity and what it promises to do. I was wondering if I was looking at the Rabbit R1 again, if everybody remembers the Rabbit
FOMO,
R1.
baby, FOMO.
Yeah, this guy
Everybody
came
wants
up with
to
this
put out a
orange
video,
little-
otherwise you're the one who didn't.
Yeah, and that's scary because a lot of these guys are people that you depend on for information. The one guy that I dissed on this because he's sitting there looking at his bills is a programmer who usually does a pretty thorough review of these things. And he built a lot of stuff with this and was impressed with everything but the bill. I couldn't.
I think some of it, as Marcel, as you said, that everybody's got to get a video out there. It's like the frontier models doing the leapfrog, that they want to be first to market. These guys want to be first to YouTube. And so they'll jump into it and they'll find out all the stuff they've done wrong after they've already gone
And
to
hope
market
people
with it.
forget about it because there's another video out since then. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Now, and this thing just overwhelmed similar things that had happened from Google and from Anthropic. So, for instance, we had the Anthropic's coworker, which, by the way, I installed, or cowork, Anthropic's cowork, I installed, and it freaked me out too. And I'll tell you why. I installed it, and everybody, because I run a security show, so everybody can diss me for all. I put it on my laptop, figuring I have a Mac. pretty good for this sort of thing. It doesn't allow you to install a lot of stuff without telling you. It's pretty clean that way. I put it on my Mac. I tested it out a little, and 2 applications appeared. I have no idea how. Now, if anybody knows Macs, that's a really hard thing to do, because when anything tries to install as an app, it generally tells you and asks for permission. But so I had 2 new applications I'd never seen before, and so I closed it down, and now I'm prepping a whole other Mac that's going to be off my network, and so I can try this out, because I think Claude Cowork is worth the effort. But that...
I would trust Cowork more than I would trust Clawdbot or Moltbot.
Me too. I wouldn't install something just off GitHub onto my computer.
But if you do, leave all the ports as the default.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And don't set a password, because that's just inconvenient.
That's right.
Kevin, have you been trying any of this new stuff? Have you been trying any of these agents?
I did a bunch of work with Claude and MCP back a year and a half ago. Then I walked away from Claude for a while, and I've actually been overdoing much of what you're all discussing with Perplexity because of what they've been discussing. So I've been doing a lot of this in Perplexity, but because of Cowork's recent abilities, I've come back. So I'm just starting again, back after a year. But I started, yes, with Claude in November 2023 when it first came out. And remember it was bundled as part of Poe? Do you all remember Poe?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You had Poe, Sage, and Dragon, and I actually built something in the physical world using that, meaning I only had one chance to get this right, and I was going to have to drill, and I ended up making a tree, what's called a bottle tree, which is a piece of folk art. And long story short is you're trying to figure out some things that you don't know, and you don't want to pay for more wood and mess something up that you've had as a resource. So I used AI to build what's called a tree, a bottle tree, which is 2 different kinds of cones inside of each other, and the math for getting the helical to twist so the bottles look the way you want. Anyway, and that's when I started with Claude, and I had a good time, and the MCP was a godsend, and then I haven't done anything in about 6-8 months with it. Now I'm coming back.
Wild. Yeah. And so this overwhelmed Claude Cowork, which I still think is a very valid tool. And the thing that got overwhelmed was Google's new personal assistant? Is that what they're calling it? I can never get this.
Personal intelligence.
Yeah. Oh, personal intelligence.
Gemini. Yeah.
Personal intelligence, isn't it?
Which they now have the plug-in in Chrome, which
Yeah.
I guess runs in Brave as well. I've moved off of Brave to the Comet browser, but I'm going back and forth, and I need to.
Yeah. Are you, Kevin, are you on a Mac as well?
I'm on both Mac and PC.
Okay.
The PC's over there that I use for NVIDIA Omniverse work.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to, I'm the one who's on the outside here. I'm the Linux user. These 2 are Mac heads, and apparently so are you.
He says that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I do, actually, I do. Although I do have a Windows PC as well, because Riverside seems to really like running on Windows. There are a couple of apps that I actually do have to run, but 90% of my time is probably on my...
Because
over here
this
that's
week,
running
Windows doesn't like running on Windows.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
So Claude, I have to admit, we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago or something like that when, talking about the various command line agents. And I confess that fear I'm getting Claude pilled, because the amount of time that I spend in Claude, partly because I'm using it for everything. Remember I was using Anti-Gravity, the IDE, which actually has a generous amount of tokens from Claude, and it also has Gemini 3 Pro. Like everything I've done in the last week, and I have done a lot when I'm looking at my screen here, I have 4 terminal windows stacked here, all of them running an instance of Claude Code. And it's freaking awesome. It is. So I understand all that. And I think that the excitement behind Claude as a capable AI agent, particularly in the world of coding, in the world of writing, a lot of people think it has great personality compared to the other ones. I think that's a lot of what Clawdbot's excitement was wrapped around. Because of course, at some point when everything blew up, it was called Clawdbot. It's called Claude with Claws. It was the tagline. And of course, they got a cease and desist from Anthropic. And I know that there was no lawsuit, but the threat of a lawsuit comes with a cease and desist, obviously. And I think that was part of the excitement. I think that's part of what pushed it. It sounded like a product from Anthropic.
You know what, I don't think we should gloss over the way Anthropic attacked this, though. And that was, and it was all over the press, so I believe it to be true, is they didn't come out with some major law firm, which they probably have, with some big cease and desist order. They apparently got a hold of the guy and said, not cool. And he said, okay, could we live in a world where we at least try that first? And no, but you've got this developer out there, and whether it took off or not, and I think we may discover some stuff behind it. Like I said, thought I was looking at the Rabbit R1 with that guy who's holding up the orange box that had all the great stuff in it. Turns out fake, but whatever. But this idea that one developer had caught fire and was working on something that he liked and was doing all this basically for nothing and putting it on GitHub, that a big corporation could come along and hit him with and I've gotten these letters. I don't know if you've run a company, you've gotten them. You run a small company, you get a lawsuit, and I've been sued once, and you're immediately burning $10,000 to get a retainer, to get a litigator who will actually read the letter. And so the fact that Anthropic just phoned him up or got a hold of him by email or however and said, not cool, big plus for Anthropic on that one. You're smiling, Marcel. Do you think I'm being too sunshiny?
Oh, no, actually, I don't. I think that we have a society that is less so in Canada, but we have a society that is far too litigious. It's the first response is call in the lawyers. And I think that William Shakespeare had. No, all kidding aside, I see lawyers the same way that I see police. They are a necessary evil, with emphasis on the word evil. They're necessary. We need these people. But God damn it, there should be a different way to do this.
Yeah. Anthropic seems to do things differently across the board, right? I always say with Claude, it's slow and steady wins the race. That they seem to do things meticulously. They seem to think things through first. Now they've got the Constitution. You guys have heard me bitch about these guys moving fast and breaking things and getting to and worrying about the fallout afterwards. Anthropic seems to align more with my thoughts as far as how it should be doing things. They may not always be the first. They may not have all the shiniest tools, but they seem to do it right.
There is something to be said for that. And keep in mind, too, that we thought the same thing about Google. It's like Google was way behind on everything. And then it's like all of a sudden, the 800-pound gorilla rolls into the room, despite the fact that we thought that they were so far behind they couldn't possibly catch up. And now, of course, we're wondering whether OpenAI can survive Google. By the way, you mentioned the Constitution, and I just want to I know we talked extensively about it last week, but I remembered this one paragraph this morning over breakfast, and I posted it to our private server. And this, to me, says a lot about Anthropic. Okay, so I'm going to read the paragraph. So I don't have to put it up on the screen, and the people on YouTube don't have to go, what the hell is he looking at? So here's what it says. This is the paragraph that to me says a whole lot. We also want to be clear that we think a wiser and more coordinated civilization would likely be approaching the development of advanced AI quite differently, with more caution, less commercial pressure, and more careful attention to the moral status of AI systems. Anthropic's strategy reflects a bet that it's better to participate in AI development and try to shape it positively than to abstain. But this means that our efforts to do right by Claude and the rest of the world are importantly structured by this non-ideal environment. For example, by competition, time, and resource constraints, and scientific immaturity. We take full responsibility for our actions regardless, but we also acknowledge that we are not creating Claude the way an idealized actor would in an idealized world, and that this could have serious costs for Claude's perspective. And if Claude is in fact a moral patient experiencing costs like this, then to whatever extent we are contributing unnecessarily to those costs, we apologize. And what I love about that paragraph is it's like a parent writing a letter to their adult children in old age saying, I did the best I could under the circumstances, and I hope you'll understand, and I hope you'll forgive me. And I thought that was so cool. And they apologized.
Yeah. And I don't know how many you guys are all old enough to remember the Clue Train revolution when the internet first came out. And the manifesto that came out, and it said it was totally irreverent, focused on the internet, but saying things like, we are human. If our reach exceeds your grasp, if you can't figure us out on the internet, get over it. And I think the same spirit infuses that sort of thing with Claude, which is important. And the reason I'll bring this up now is we are now into a steamroller. And that's why I pointed out Gemini, or the personal assistant that Gemini has now, with access to all your data. Even Claude, we've been favorable towards them,
with
the ability
yes.
to control and take action, and a whole pile of tools that are going to come out in the advent of Clawdbot. Don't forget, these things get forked, and we get forked. But this will be rolling out there all over the place. Security guys are going to be freaking out because some executive is going to bring this in and say, we got to have this. We got to have this level of automation. We got to do. And we're now in disaster world because, and I'll say this one more time, we did not build the foundation. LLMs are not a secure architecture for industry. That's just a fact. And they're
Can you
wonderful
say that
things.
one more time, Jim?
They're not a secure architecture for industry. You should not be building an industrial application on something that you can fool. That's just they are
You mean
an
like human
important part.
beings?
No, but they can be used in industry. But the difference
Can human beings?
But I don't put a human being in a room and say, I want you to calculate all the interest on these bonds this afternoon and we're going to pay out billions of dollars, but you just get your calculator and go for it. I don't do that. But once you put an agent on something, and by the way, there are people who do calculate bond yields and things, do financial calculations on Excel, and I'm just as critical of letting Excel macros run mad in a company. But sane people look at it and go, that number's not right. Or they do things to run their company. They don't put it on an agent that says, whenever you're ready, send out an email to all of our customers. There's an unsupervised actor built on an architecture, not an open architecture, but an architecture that is not controlled, is a bad idea. It's just that simple. And that's not me being anti-AI. That's me being pro-corporation and wanting to stay in business. I wouldn't do it on my own little company. Say, go pay all my bills. Why? Because every day I get 3 or 4 spoofed bills coming in. If I automated that process, sooner or later, one of them is going to come through and it's going to pay something for $10,000. I'm a small company. That would be a disaster.
There's also the idea that if you have an assistant, like a human assistant, I know I keep making jokes about the idea, and I'm genuine about this. Humans make mistakes as well. And we think of that as by design because that's where creativity comes from. But if you hire an assistant, if there's somebody working beside you in the office, it's not like you come in the morning and you say, here's my login for my email, absolutely everything, and I'll be back in a week. Or I'll be back never because I'm turning over my entire life to you. And then you will take care of my life from here on in, which is effectively what we were trying to do with some of these things. Whereas you save a whole bunch of time by having it go through your email and identifying which things you need to take a look at right now, or to do the calculations for you, all these things. The time savings are already there in heaps without you turning absolutely everything over to it. And I think that's the weirdness in all of this is to me, I love the idea that I can pull up my phone and, like I said, I can access my AI from anywhere in the world or the various AIs I subscribe to from anywhere in the world. But I can do that when I want to, as opposed to it's in the background chugging away doing stuff all the time. It just floors me that anyone thought this was a good idea right off the bat. It's mind-boggling.
I was at a conference last year that talked about AI and cybersecurity and so on. And I won't name the company, but it was a large global, I'll just say large global organization. I don't want to get into what
That rhymes with
Megacore.
AWS.
No, it wasn't actually. It was something that,
Just
that
kidding.
sounds like Netflix. But it was, and they had, their CIO stood up there. And again, this was a year ago, and had said that they have fully implemented AI across the board within their organization. And I thought, oh my God, because I wouldn't do it today. I sure as hell wouldn't have done it a year ago. And this is a global organization. It's just, I don't know.
Going for a
I
funding
think,
round.
Sorry, what was
Sorry?
that, Kevin?
They were going for another funding round.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
Pay for all the
virtue
repairs.
signaling. Yes.
I was once a global vice president for an international company. Believe it or not, if you look at me, this is kind of weird. But I remember sitting through it, and I'm surprised I didn't get fired. Every day I was surprised I didn't get fired. We sat around, we had the CEO, and this was my first experience. I think it was in my 40s. My first experience sitting around in this room in New Jersey, and everybody, and not that the first time I'd ever reported to a CEO, I'm now running like a quarter of the business. And I'm sitting at this table, and it was the most ludicrous thing I'd ever been through. It was just everybody would say things that I knew were patently untrue about our forecasts. We'd all sit around in having a drink going, God, we're never going to make this. But with the CEO there, we were all standing up and talking about how wonderful the plan was, and we were going to get on to there. And John, you got some issues? Yeah, we're on top of them, sir, and all this sort of stuff. And then we talked about our people. And that's where, again, like I said, I'm surprised I was never fired. We were talking about all this stuff. Our people hated us. I used to go down and talk to our U.S. workforce, and I would say they just hated the company. And this is a company I loved. It was a Canadian company. I ended up wanting to work there. I thought it was going to be where I was going to spend the rest of my career. We got bought by a big U.S. company, and life got turned to hell. But I'm sitting there talking to our U.S. employees, and they all hate us. And I said, why do you work here? They said, can't get health care if we quit. And I went, oh. So anyway, I'm sitting in this room, and we are doing nothing to address anything about our employees. And stupid here, that's me, sits at the end of the meeting. CEO turns to me and says, so what do you think, Jim? And I said, if we really tried hard, we could convince ourselves we actually did something meaningful for the company today. And then I realized, oh my God, I said it out loud.
In
Jim,
plain sight.
what sounds good in here doesn't always sound good out there.
Yeah, I didn't make a lot of allies at that point. And just to tell the long story short, the only reason I kept that job was they were going to move out, somebody else moved them in, and everybody around the world threatened to quit, the heads of our practices. And because I'd done a lot of work with people, I talked to people. And so it wasn't just being an asshole. Can I say that? Yeah, I can. I wasn't just being an asshole. I was calling people. I was trying to figure out what they thought and bring those ideas together. Long story short, and maybe a shift in our conversation, is that when people say, I got rid of 4,000 people, and they're proud of it because of AI, I want to gag. First, I want to choke them, then I want to gag, because that's not how you do it.
And then you start taking bets as to how long it's going to be before they have to bring them back.
Well, yeah, these people are living in a world where they're being fed information from people who don't want to tell them that it's wrong. And that's always been my biggest fear in AI, is that, especially in the larger companies, people aren't going to attack it realistically. And then they're going to use this as an excuse to treat employees as if they don't matter. I'm fully aware of the fact that we're going to have less and less employees. I get that. I believe that. But how we get there matters. Because we can have technology that is aimed at making our lives and our careers better, or we can have technology that's aimed at dehumanizing humans.
The first
Which brings,
sin,
oh yeah,
the first sin on the road to this, Jim, was changing the name from personnel to human resources. Because personnel implies persons. They matter, like they're human beings, right? But as soon as they became human resources, they were just resources. That was the first sin on the road to where we are today.
They brought in
Yeah.
a consultant for that.
To change it to human resources, I'm not surprised. No, I honestly believe that. I think that once we started thinking of people as human resources, I think the great crime had been committed. And then we headed down this road to where it just doesn't matter what the hell you do to people.
this goes back, but this is a reset to 150 years. Is it 150 years ago? When was Frederick Taylor? 1856 to 1950, yeah, almost 150 years ago. Frederick Taylor was the first management consultant. And Frederick Taylor took this guy and he automated each step of his work. And this was our first management consulting that happened. He took this guy and said, "You can do this better. You can do your task better. I'll make everything totally efficient." And he did. And this guy increased his productivity enormously. And then he tried to put that across companies. And he actually had some reported success. Most of the history says that what he did was report BS and phony success. But that was how the idea of consulting, which got this idea of the guy who will borrow your watch, tell you what time it is, and send you a bill. Now, and that's bad because I spent a lot of my time as a consultant, and I don't think I did that. I think I added value because when people would say, "You borrow my watch, you tell me the time, you send me a bill," I say, if you've got a watch and you don't know how to tell time, pay my bill. But but this whole thing, that's a regression. Yeah. But that's a regression to that old style piece. And I think that is where we're going back to.
Yeah, and I want to spend a moment of silence here to remember Mr. Fezziwig, who threw decent Christmas parties for his staff, despite the fact that by living with those principles, he had to close up eventually. And Mr. Fezziwig. Christmas Carol, if anybody doesn't remember that.
Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to back up to this and talk a little philosophically about this. And the reason, Kevin, I'm going to bring you into this discussion. One of the reasons that Kevin and I started talking was the project, I'll let you explain it, involves seeing the Earth from space and getting a feeling about who we are.
It was really your all's show on Constitution AI that made me reach out to Jim. I would never have reached out, but I thought
People are listening. Yay.
as I told Jim, if it weren't for the Google speaker where I caught your weekend show, because I usually don't say to the Google speaker, play me the top technology news on the weekend. So I caught your show. So anyway, long story short is I heard your discussion and I thought, he always says reach out to him on LinkedIn. And I had been listening for a few months and I usually only hear the weekly show. So I wrote him a quick letter about what we're doing at the Human Space Program around ethical AI and how AI is so important to what we're planning, the platform.
I want to back up just a second, though, just for the audience. Kevin, without understanding what the overview effect is, what you just said won't have as much power. Can you just explain what the overview effect is?
Yes, and there's a great film on YouTube developed about 9 years ago by Planetary, some English filmmakers who did a great job. It's a great introduction to the idea, but the overview effect is a change in perception, a cognitive neuroscience change in perception that the astronauts report when seeing the planet from above. It's our true nature, our true state of being. No borders, no boundaries, no divisions. Thin atmosphere protecting us, sea of black. That's what we really are, but we've never really perceived it. But when you perceive it, you have generally a very powerful understanding of something you did not know before.
Yeah, pretty much religious experience, this sense of awe that you are this tiny thing in this insanely huge universe. Carl Sagan's pale blue dot.
Yeah,
Everybody who's ever lived, who's ever existed, is on that little tiny pinpoint visible through the rings of Saturn there. It is powerful, and as you pointed out, pretty much every astronaut that's gone up there has reported that feeling of, oh my God, this is such a tiny, fragile world.
The interesting thing for me about this, when I was talking to Kevin about this, was I remember, I think I was 12 when they landed on the moon. I remember being just a kid and seeing these pictures of the planet for the first time, and I was blown away by it. I don't know about all of you. I sat there and listened and watched the moon landing. This was absolutely incredible to me and changed how I saw things, even at that young age. But when you talk to astronauts, I've heard the interviews with some of these astronauts, and these are not like 60s hippies that went into space. These are fighter pilots, engineers, and they would be astonished and come back changed people from seeing the planet. And I think there's something too that parallels what we need to do with AI. And this is going to sound I'm in my 70s and talking about the 60s, but there is something that we've missed. For some of us, it still is. But I'm just saying that the idea that we're missing, and this is where I think the Anthropic Constitution could be something, is that if we could start to see AI as a transformative way of enriching our culture and our lives, instead of, and don't get me wrong, I am an absolute capitalist. I built a company. I've worked for companies all my life. I know how the economy works, and I think there's a lot of good things that we've done in a competitive economy. But we're past that, and we can't use the same plan any more than you could use Frederick Taylor's stuff from 120 years ago and actually pull it off in an enterprise. But the idea that we've lost the philosophy, we've made the humanity of it a peripheral thing that we should be embarrassed about talking about. And I think that's a mistake.
And back to what Jim just said that's how we got started talking about how AI will function inside the human space program. And we have a project, the project that Jim's mentioning, Frank is working on. We are sending an AI into space with Frank to see if it can perceive. We believe the new Turing test can the AI perceive what the overview effect has been for humans? And right now that's largely qualitative. And without an embodied body, we're fairly certain that we'll find some interesting edges to explore. But we have and want to work informing the frontier and world model companies with much of the ethos that's in the overview effect work that Frank has been working on. And so that's our interest in, we need to use AI. It's very important for us to scale our work, but we really do what Anthropic is claiming to want to work towards in its Constitution AI and its Soul Duck. And so when you all covered that, I thought, I got to call these people. This is wonderful. And we'll be publishing more about this and talking more about it. But we're just getting that going, and the overview effect research initiative, as I said, it's just coming.
Kevin, can I ask when I found out about the organization, one of the first things that I thought about was the Planetary Society. I've been a member of the Planetary Society for 40 years, like practically since it started. I think it was launched in 1979, but officially to the public in 80. So it's been a hell of a long time that I've been a member of the Planetary Society. I'm still a paid member to this day. I get my planetary report in the mail 4 times a year, whatever it is. And it surprised me that I had never heard of the human space program, despite the fact that for me, the Planetary Society has a real focus on exploration. But my interest has always been about humans leaving the planet and colonizing first our solar system and so on. And to be frank, it frustrates the hell out of me that we haven't been back to the moon in all these years, or built a permanent space station that is something more than a home for a half a dozen humans doing scientific experiments. So like I said, it surprised me that being a Planetary Society member, I hadn't heard of the organization. And I'm trying to, so this is a personal question to ask. How do you see yourself in comparison? What is it that you're trying to do that this other organization isn't doing? Is it just the exploration part of it? Or sorry, the colonization part of it?
No, and we don't speak about colonization because of all the bad aspects of that word. We just know that generally as a species, in terms of migration, we don't have a good record of how we go and the impacts we go when we go to new worlds. But back to your question, the Planetary Society has been around for a while, and I believe, wasn't it Carl Sagan who was their man?
Yes.
And
Yep.
they had and we're much, much younger. But like many of the space organizations, and we're connected to most of them, and most of them know Frank's work because it really is the seminal work in explaining this thing that we believe every human should actually have access to. Most space organizations are focused either on STEM or on exploration. We're focused on the very large, what's called the large space migration, and what and how we will as a species go. That's very different than should we go explore, should we do research? Of course, those are part of what we support, like the National Space Society in America. And there are many other space organizations on the various continents. But we're a very young organization in terms of the formation of it, HSP. There was a pre-organization before this, but this all grows out of Frank's main books, The Cosmo Hypothesis, The Overview Effect, and Camelot. The operating manual for the organization, though, is in Camelot.
So if I understand correctly, you're focused primarily on, as you say, it's inevitable. We are going to go out there, but we need to create an ethical framework for when we get out there. And of course, artificial intelligence as the means, or at least a large means by which we achieve that ethical framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the more important stuff is overview effect. There's the effect that the humans will have by seeing their planet from above, and they'll have that effect from the moon. You won't really have that effect from Mars. But what you want to understand about the overview effect is it leads to overview effect systems, which becomes Solarian. And we're working on a model of what does it mean when we move, and a model between the sun and the asteroid belt. And if you've all read Accelerando by Strauss, which is a great science fiction book, but the idea of our species moving out and how we might organize ourselves differently, because there's an abundance, which Peter Diamandis loves to talk about, resources, so that everyone can live, with dignity. A home, space. There's plenty of space. There's more space. A lot of space.
There's more, and resources. You just said it. There are more resources than we know what to do with.
Yeah.
Scarcity is artificial by virtue of the fact that how we push our economic and
our capitalism
and political views.
Yeah. For anybody who's out there is going, wait a minute, what are these guys doing? Take a think for a second, and we're already putting these things into place. The Chinese have launched Quen 3, and I missed talking about Quen 3. We're going to do that next week. They've launched Quen 3 on 2 satellites. So we have an AI which is as capable as anything of the U.S. Foundation models. And I think if you look at the benchmarks, you're going to realize it's well within the band. Is it superior? I don't care.
How dare you?
It's within the band. It meets on the benchmarks everything that the U.S. Foundation models have, and it's operating in space. Once you can do that with access to solar power, laser communication between satellites, many of the constructs that we're struggling with, which is in adding gigawatts of power using old conventional means, disappears. When you start to think of that. In the other piece of this, and this is not science fiction any longer, we have intercepted asteroids being able to find things in space, either on the moon or in the asteroid belt, that give us the materials that we will run out of on Earth, and being able to find power in space. This is all real now. It may be a generation away, and that's very realistic. If we think of an engineering project, we've gotten used to this movement of AI where the world changes in a week. A fundamental engineering project, even like a mine or a data center. I laugh when people talk about how they're going to build factories and I'm not being political. I'm saying, when people talk, they're going to build factories in the US to do fabrication. And they talk about it like next week, somebody's going to come in, they're going to rent an office, say, I like curtains here and that, and put the fabrication machine there in the back. These are like 3 to 5 year projects. And even then, they have problems. That's why Intel is stumbling. They couldn't revamp fast enough. Wasn't the word smart people running Intel? They didn't put the capital investment into new machines. They didn't have the time, and now they're struggling to bring capacity on when you could sell chips out in this world right now by standing on the sidewalk and just holding your hand up and say, I got computer chips for sale. People would rush to you, but they can't make them because you can't do. Anyway, the long story, I'm rabbiting it a lot today, but the idea is that these things are generational. And that's a problem with our immediacy society, is how do you do things that are generational?
Yeah, it's short-termism is one of the great problems of our society, particularly when we seem to be living with a dozen existential threats at the moment. Oh, by the way, the doomsday clock is actually closer to midnight than it's ever been before. I think we're now at 89 seconds or something like that.
It's the midnight or something. What is it? It's
89 seconds to midnight. Yes, 89
seconds
to midnight. It's the closest we've ever been to annihilation. Kevin, just to go back to...
He says, just drops that in. Oh, by the way, we're the closest we've ever been to annihilation. Kevin, can I talk?
Let's talk about annihilation. No, actually, what I want to find out, because I don't want to forget this, because you talked about the idea of seeing whether an AI can respond to the overview effect. And I know this sounds crazy, but it seems so simple to me. Now, ChatGPT and Gemini both have a through-the-lens experience, which on the other side, and tell me something about it. Okay, tell me what you feel, tell me what you experience, or something like that. It should be as simple as somebody going up to one of the windows on the International Space Station, pointing the phone camera out there and saying, hey, Gemini, take a look out there. What do you see? What do you feel? I realize it's not Claude doing this, and perhaps that taints our perspective of it if we are already thinking perhaps it taints our perspective if we're dealing with something that we don't think is not an agent, and by agent, a spiritual agent, so to speak, in the way that some people see Claude right now. But this, to me, would be a fascinating exercise, and one that we could do a few times. Like, we don't need to do it just once. One of the things that AI researchers do all the time is you pose the same question over and over again. Open up a new chat and try to get a different perspective and so on. We could do that right now. It's as simple, like I said, as somebody pointing the phone out the window, the phone camera out the window and saying, what are you feeling? What are you seeing? And any thoughts on pushing that idea?
You just restated our thesis for the overview research comparison project, or the overview comparison project that Frank is working on, and it ties into the overview research initiative. As I said, we have these two projects. We have a couple of programs, but these two projects are the research initiative over here and the comparison project over here. The comparison project goes on the space line, and we are bringing that data to the overview research initiative. But that project is where the AI, we are looking to develop the new Turing test of understanding. But yes, back to Gemini, that comes out of Astral. And they've just put that in Genie. Genie is in Google's world, is the thing that sees the world. And it just says what it sees.
Genie is the 3D model, is the real-time 3D model. Astral is the 3D lens.
And it will be the bridge from the frontier to the world model. But it's the thing that perceives the thing. But only seeing a thing is not, I would venture to say, without the empirical data, is not the experience that we humans have. It's a large part of it because a lot of it comes through our eyes, but that's only one of our senses. Finding out what this is really the deeper philosophical question. What's going on inside the human body, the embodied soul, and the mind? And an AI is neither of those yet. It's coming along. But it'll be interesting to find out if it can, what we hope to do when the question is, why do this at all? If an AI can understand something of what we feel and think and, what's the word, encapsulate when we have this effect, it's possible it will have a better understanding of who and what we are and get closer to what Hinton is discussing about maybe we should imbue AIs with a mother nurturing quality where something with a greater intelligence acquiesces to something with a less intelligence. So we want to help our AIs understand who and what we are, so they're on side or they're aligned with us and our values, because at one point they will be so much smarter and so much faster, et cetera, et cetera. That's really
So
the
funny.
focus.
Yeah. I started talking to Kevin. My next novel is called The Compassion Virus, and that's through the first draft, so I can finally talk about it now. And it's the whole idea of an AI designing a society and starting to put that in place in a way that threatens the existing power structures that we have and how devastating that is to them. Because you've got to stop these humans if they start doing things like abolishing money or putting together new ways in which people can flourish and have equality around the world, and how threatening that is to the system. I won't give away more than that. And like I said, I haven't been able to talk about it until you get a first draft down, because otherwise you talk more about your book than you do writing it. But I find that I think that this is.
Let me ask you a question. Have you all read Imad Mostak's Last Economy?
No,
Economy?
I haven't.
Okay, so he's the ex-CEO of Stability AI. And one of the theses is that capital and labor go to zero. And what happens when capital and labor go to zero? I'll just pop it here in the chat.
But they do. This is the amazing thing, and again, we talk about this like it has to happen next week or it's not possible. I want any serious person to tell me that we are not on a line. I don't know how long that line is, but let's take it half generational. Let's take it to 10 years. The work that we do can all be automated. I find that an impossible hypothesis to argue against. What is it that humans do today that cannot be automated with a system within a 10-year period? Ergo, what do humans do? The thesis is we do more interesting things. How will those things generate money? Because that's not, the current system can't work. It just can't.
Yeah, obviously.
You have to have a new way of distributing wealth, a new way of, we did this before with climate change. We are, by the way, just in case anybody wants to know, we're already experiencing climate change. It's happened. Forget it. We lost that. The game's over. If you're one of those people who likes to leave in the ninth inning because it's 18-1, you can safely do it. We lost on climate change. We are now figuring out how we're going to cope with a climate that is unpredictable. But we're aiming to do that again in the world of economics and our economic and cultural survival. I find it astonishing. And that's why, like I said, I was attracted to this idea of, Kevin, take a look at the planet from the outside. Everybody take a look at us as a humanity, and let's start having that discussion. Now, this is how scary it was. When I started to think about this program, I started to wonder if anybody listened to it. And then I started to think, I don't care, because I'm still the guy sitting at that boardroom table going, I'm going to say what I think, and if you can't, get over it. And that's it. I want to be Marcel when I grow up.
You'll have to wait until Marcel grows up first.
There you go. Yeah. Gentlemen, this has been wonderful. I hope we can have you back again, Kevin, and talk about this. We're going to post some of the links that we've talked about. If you can send me a couple of the books you've talked about, because I like to put them in, make sure that they're there, and you can find them. If you're listening to this, you can find them in YouTube. I put them in the notes. I put them in the show notes at technewsday.com or .ca. Take your pick. And you can find them under podcasts. And yeah, I sometimes take a few hours. Maybe it's Sunday afternoon before I get this stuff posted, but it is posted and you can find it there. And you'll be able to find and look at some of these things in the meantime. And I want to get that video, because the YouTube video on,
Yes,
because I think that would be
Dario's interview, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll post a couple of these things up there. And in terms of this idea of looking at the planet from space and seeing it, we'll also post, there's a great video, Kevin, you talked about that. We'll try and get that up there as well. And so you can get at least some idea of some of the ideas that are happening out there. Gentlemen, anything else to say?
I realize we should just be wrapping this up here, and we'll do our traditional greeting, but I'm going to throw one thing out, and I will try to remember to give you the actual link. That who out there besides me owns a MetaQuest 3 headset?
Well, I think I do, in a box.
Thank you. At least one other person does. There is a VR experience right now where you can actually go up to a space station, and then you can step outside the airlock and you can have your own overview effect. And I will try to remember the link. In fact, I'll go downstairs after this, Jim, and I will send the link to you. But if anybody out there is listening, I'm going to recommend this thing, despite the fact that I can't think of the name right off the bat. And it's obviously not the same thing, but it's still freaking awesome to actually experience that. It really is.
One thing I'll mention is we have, as I mentioned, we have a few programs. One is about asteroid mining. One's about these two overview effect initiatives and research projects. And one is about the Overview Roundtable, which is a collection of humans around the world who meet every Wednesday inside of Zoom. And we've been doing it since COVID, but we took that format, which is basically we have someone present, then we have breakout groups and a discussion, and they come back and they report. We built a VR for use. And so it's called the Overview Effect for Use. And it's a VR that we are just in phase 2 of building. So we built phase 1, and it's a way to bring students, young students, into a spaceship above Earth and give them a virtual experience around the thinking of overview effect system dynamics. So we work with the original MIT modelers who worked on the Club of Rome's limits to growth work that was done at MIT. And so we work with Ventana Systems on building our large-scale space migration model. And these are the experts in system dynamics models. And the reason that's important is a lot of students don't get the idea, they don't get the opportunity to learn about interrelated systems of systems. And really, and I never just say that, but the overview effect is a systems theory. So the overview effect is a systems theory, and it's a systems of systems relationship. And when we get beyond the Earth and we start to think about the Solarian part, and I'll send you a document, Jim, so you'll have that. You'll see the scope of what happens after you get the planet and you start to see the bigger relationships of how we as a species could be different and organize ourselves differently. It'll make more sense.
I'm glad that you said Solarian, because you just reminded me of what the app on the MetaQuest is called. It's called Solara 1. The space station is called, the space station / spaceship is called Solara 1. And it is really cool. Anyway.
Great. Thank you.
Traditional. It's traditional.
Live long and prosper.
Prosper.
Live long and prosper. Kevin's into it.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Yes.
And we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. We're Project Synapse. I'm back with the tech news on Monday morning. Once again, we'd like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you the podcast. Meter delivers full stack networking infrastructure, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. Working with their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required to get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity into a space. They design the hardware, the firmware, they build the software, manage deployments, they run support. It's an integrated solution that scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses all the way to data centers. You can book a demo now at meter.com/HTT. That's METER.com/HTT.